So hello and welcome to another episode of the SAIF Wellbeing Podcast with myself, Katie, and I am delighted today to be joined by Catherine Betley of SAIF Support, SAIF Care, who work very, very closely with SAIF, providing extra support out with obviously what we do in the everyday parts of the industry. So Catherine, thank you so much for joining me today. Very excited about this.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
So basically, I just want you to tell anyone listening or watching us having this conversation a bit about what you do, a bit of your background, to allow us to set up of then what I'm going to ask you that you don't know about yet.
It's all very exciting. I love a mystery podcast. It's really good to be here. Many of the members will know that from professional help's perspective, we've been partners of SAIF and members of SAIF for really quite a long time now. And mainly we've been involved in delivering the SAIF Support service and the SAIF Care service, which we might get to chat about later. But SAIF Support is the membership benefit for all employees of SAIF, full members, and I think associate members as well these days, whereby you can use the telephone helpline that we offer and the email support service to really explore anything that's going on that might be affecting or impacting on your mental health. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a work issue. It could be any life stresses, health anxieties, things that are going on around you. Maybe the pressures of work have built up. Maybe there've been, a few too many young suicides or baby funerals, or the things that we find difficult to deal with. So essentially, we provide a 9 till 9 Monday to Friday helpline and an email access, because some of the chaps prefer to send us an email to check in with people. We're not actually fairies, so we reply to people. We can organise to call them back. And then essentially the space to talk to a professional counsellor, whether that's on a formal basis where we sort of have maybe a weekly session or a monthly session, or an ad hoc basis on the helpline where you can have up to an hour just chatting about what's happening for you, what your current support structure might look like, where you might get some extra help, whether counselling is the right thing for you, what you're hoping to get out of that process, and just really somewhere to put some of those stresses that we face in the industry.
Yes, thank you very much. That summarises it up very, very well, and I think it starts us off nicely. And I was thinking about how we could, look at this, especially with the vast support that SAIF Support and SAIF Care can provide for all of us within the industry. And I wanted to start by, asking you why having something like SAIF Support. So me as a working funeral director, struggling dealing with well-being, I have had my various struggles. Why is it important now for us to utilise how ourselves as funeral profession workers, look after our well-being because of the job that we ultimately have to do?
And I think it is important to look at the job itself and the nature of the work. And, a lot of the funeral directors we speak to probably don't like the view don't like it, but are not that comfortable with the view that actually you do things that other people don't even think about on a day-to-day basis. These are not things that are in the public sight these days. We don't care for a dead at home. We don't kind of take control of these processes anymore. Death is very much shrouded in professionalization to a degree, medicalization to a degree. We don't kind of own our dead people these days, that like we used to do sort of maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago. People are less involved in those processes, and they don't know what to expect. They don't know what sights and sounds and smells. They don't know how normal it is to do this work to a degree. And it's kind of like the unknown in some ways. The public, I don't think, recognise what people do. And some of the complexities and difficulties, clearly, if you're dealing with traumatic incidents or accidents or people ending their own lives, whatever it might be, things that might touch on your own family or on your own self. And combine that with just being regular human beings. We've all been, we've all had our struggles in that sense. It's a rare person that's 100% mentally kind of mental uptime all the time, who hasn't got any chinks in their armor, who hasn't occasionally suffered from a bout of anxiety or felt a little bit off or a little bit down. It's a pretty rare person, I think, these days that you would find to have a conversation with who'd never experienced that at all. I'm very lucky if they haven't. But a lot of the stuff that we do is around helping people find their resilience. I think by their nature, people in the funeral profession are much more resilient, actually, than a lot of the general population that we come across. And actually, the things that you find stressful tend to be at the extreme end of stressful. And that's one of the things I don't think people in this profession particularly appreciate either, is actually the stuff that you find stressful, the rest of the world finds catastrophically stressful. So actually you guys take on quite a lot
Yeah,
more than this,
yeah.
because to you, you know, this is just work. This is what you do. You deal with grieving people, you deal with difficult incidents, you deal with the stuff that the rest of us don't want to think about. But actually, you know, the general stresses of strains of life also coincide with that. You know, you'll have children, you'll have your own mental health struggles, you might have your own health struggles, you'll have bereavements, you'll have difficulties with money, just like everybody else does. So the two combined tend to be where we see people come into our services, where work and life really kind of clash in some ways, to kind of make sure that people are really struggling at that point. And I wish they'd come sooner, because we can often help find places to help, you know, put some of this stress down, or to look at it in context of the good work that people are doing, the why. You know, everybody talks about Simon Sinek, you'll everybody probably be familiar with him. You know, finding your why. This is a very purpose-driven industry. People tend to be here quite often because there's a family connection, but more often because there's a real desire to help people. And actually holding on to that is really, you know, there's a lot of research around resilience and how we maintain and build resilience. And a lot of that is about being purpose driven and recognizing your purpose and the value of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. But I do wish the funeral profession would recognise as well that actually that this is an inherently stressful profession, and anybody else who does this type of work, ambulance staff, police, frontline people, get much more support built in.
And I think that's why we are having this conversation right now. I want to go back to your point. You know, I wish some people did it sooner. That for me, for anyone listening, from a personal point of view, I absolutely do wish I had the help that I was fortunate enough to get beforehand. But I suppose it's finding your purpose, finding your why. When I came back into the industry after taking time off to kind of find who I was and build back to a healthy mindset, I suppose, being able to come back in with such a different mindset of the struggles that we were actually facing. And it brings me on to, you know, as you've said there, that there's a lot of, you know, we deal with families, difficult situations from babies right up until, you know, suicide, the worst possible scenarios that as a working funeral director we've had to deal with, and the struggles of that, and your experience of working with the likes of us, you know, very closely now. How would someone come into the likes of yourself to say, you know, Catherine, I'm struggling?
Yeah.
What would be the way that, you know, a lot of people want to know that it's not forever, that there is a working solution, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that it can be better, there is a way out of it. So how would, you know, the common problems, the kind of common struggles that a lot of us would come to you with, how can we look at, you know, working through that while still being able to do the difficulty of the job?
And I think that's a really key question actually, Katie, because I think sometimes what we see through SAIF Support particularly are people who are really at the end of their tether, who are a last resort. People don't want to pick up the phone and speak to our team because it's almost like admitting defeat in some ways. Whereas actually it's a really big sign of strength for people to say, I recognise that I'm in a place where some support is going to be appropriate and helpful to me, or I recognise that I need something that I can't get from my friends or my family or my partner or whoever that might be. And actually, you know, what I found certainly when I used to go to regional meetings with SAIF very regularly is that people would come up to me and say, you know, your service is really interesting, and then tell me a little bit about their stresses and the things that they'd encountered. So, you know, on a personal basis, I was able to encourage people just to pick up the phone. We've got a really down-to-earth team. We have people who've worked in this profession. We have people who know how the world works, and we're not kind of what my brother calls yogurt knitters, you know.
Well, okay, that's an expression.
So, yeah, in that sense, you know, sometimes therapy and counselling can have a bit of a bad press because it's kind of a little bit nebulous, and there's, you know, no end result necessarily, but actually creating space to allow people and a safe space to allow people to look at, in a kind of dispassionate environment as far as possible, and a non-judgmental environment, what is happening for that person. It's some of the factors that might impact on that, whether it is your own resilience or your mental health, or the people around you, or the circumstances that you find yourself, or what happened to trigger this particular incident. Or having people look at that stuff and figure out, you know, what this means for them, where the support that they need can be put into place, what needs to change, and who can do that and who can help with that, and actually how to manage those difficult feelings in that situation for, you know, a period of time.
Yeah.
It almost always does pass, even with bereavement, which is a big part of what we do. Like, no, bereavement isn't, it's forever for sure, but those very strong feelings, we hope, don't last forever. They become, you know, wider and wider. Those big waves of grief where you really can't function and you can't get on with things, they get farther apart, and people can see a little bit more light in the day, and be able to cope as you go through time. That's what we kind of hope for people. But certainly in counselling, you know, it is about having that very skillful person who's working with you to enable you to have those thoughts, and actually maybe open a box that you've found really scary beforehand. You don't really want to. And actually, one of the things we find in this profession, because people are busy, because you're dealing with really difficult circumstances, because you're supporting bereaved families who don't want to see you falling apart, people very much have a big box that they put their problems and issues and worries in, and we put the lid on it and keep it like that. And unfortunately, sometimes it explodes. So actually, it's looking at kind of, can we take the lid off that box a little bit and see what's in there, and make sure that it's not going to kind of blow up in your face. But sometimes we see people when it's really blown up in the faces.
I think it's important to point, you know, that there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. I had this expression when I was going through my experiences, and I wrote a quote saying, "When black is black, it's very black, but when white is white, it's bright." And it was just highlighting the difference of when I never thought there was a light at the end of the tunnel, that I had to keep the lid on that big box for me that was like a jack in the box when it exploded, to now where you can see things differently and be able to deal with it differently and be resilient, as we mentioned before, but be a different resilient. At the end of the day, the importance is of the ability to help someone at such a difficult time of need, no matter the circumstances, is hugely rewarding, you know, and that family and trust you more than anything in the world. And I think it comes on to, I wanted to touch on, you know, being prepared for anything that, you know, if they, you know, if you, as you say, come to, you know, they don't, no one wants to reach out, no one wants to feel that they're weak or they're failing because they need to say, listen, I'm struggling here, I need to put my hand up and say that I'm struggling. So if to have a sense of, or have a kind of self-awareness of the preparation before, you know, the explosion of everything within the box, you know, is there a way that we could be dealing with that? We can be prepared more for that? Is there anything that we could all be doing that's very simple that would help stop that from happening?
I think you're doing it, Katie. I think you're doing it by keeping talking about these issues. In lots of ways, the biggest barrier to people accessing our services is fear, and fear of lifting that lid, and fear of asking for help, and accepting help as well. What we very often find with people in this profession is you have very broad shoulders and you're used to giving help, which kind of makes you naturally tend to not ask and receive it. You know, there's a whole world of difference in lots of ways between being able to ask for help and being able to accept it, and be able to accept that, you know, there are some problems that are not immediately fixable, but with time and support, there can be a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. It's very rare that you know, that there is no hope in that sense, but sometimes it's hard to see it, and sometimes it needs that person to sit with you and figure out, where is that hope? What is keeping you here? Is it purpose? Is it your kids? Is it your dog? Is it your friendships? Is it that you are hoping for a different future from the one you've got now? Is it that things might change? So actually helping people find that light that's somewhere out there that might be very hard to spot. But in lots of ways, it's about encouraging people just to find the courage to reach out somehow. And we don't care how people reach out, whether it's a word at a meeting, whether it's a phone call, whether it's an email, a text, whatever it is. Just finding that little bit of courage to say, I'm not okay. Or this, like, and again, the other thing we hear people say quite a lot is, I'm not myself. And if you recognize that you don't feel quite yourself, something's a little bit off. Either you're not getting out of bed with the same any enthusiasm. Maybe you're kind of indulging in drink or alcohol, whatever it might be. You're not exercising the way that you normally would do. You're not enjoying things. You'd find sitting with your kids having dinner or whatever, and you're not laughing at them the way you would normally do, or you're not involved, and you're thinking, can't quite put my finger on it, but something's not quite right. That's usually a really good sign that that's a time before anything goes very wrong, before it's staring you in the face that something is very wrong. That's the time to go, actually, I need to look after myself.
And I think that's hard of, we're in very much in an industry where that is always put on the back burner, looking after ourselves. And I think another expression that I've, by doing this and talking a lot more, is the expression "I'm fine."
Yeah. And we all know what that stands for. It's a lovely acronym.
Yeah, I'm not myself, I'm fine is very much the common expressions used. Sometimes you just don't want to talk about it, you just want to stay very focused on the job in hand, per se. And it's it's a big one, by doing this, and certainly in the last few years of being able to be more involved, when we've been able to meet face to face again, I suppose, in different contexts, that the talking aspect has been so different to what it was as a 14-year-old going to their first ever meeting through in Edinburgh, it was at the time, so that was quite a few years ago now. But the conversations that we can have now, we would never have been able to have that. So that was 14 years ago now, I'm letting my age out here. But 14 years ago, it would never have been able to be spoken about. And now, more than ever, it's so important. And I think coming back from that, raising the awareness of talking and prioritising ourselves as people first and foremost to be who we need to be, by not doing any of that, will it continue to be a struggle for us to overcome the challenges that we face that create the bigger explosion within that box?
I think it's a good question. I think some people are struggling with the fact that we are almost back to normal, if you like.
Yeah.
And certainly younger people, I think, bore the brunt of how communication changed, how our support networks changed. My teenagers, who are not really teenagers anymore because they're a bit older than that, and it was anathema to them to pick the phone up anyway. And now we all communicate in voice notes in our house, which is endlessly amusing to me because it's kind of the same thing. But the rise of text messaging, and we jumped on that with the work that we've done in Grief Chat and Safe Care Chat, and using this technology to harness communication better, or to be able to communicate better. But we've got to go with however people prefer to communicate. And one of the things that I think came out of the pandemic very clearly, more particularly in bereavement and grief and loss than anything else, but I think it's pervasive across communities, is loneliness. I think we are still really struggling, a lot of us, with that sense of being slightly more isolated than we ever were. And although it's, we kind of, there are all the opportunities pretty much that there ever used to be, that shift towards disconnection, use of technology, not speaking to each other. I had my first face-to-face meeting with a prospective client this week for probably 2.5 years, because everything's been done on the phone. It was so weird but so lovely. To actually just picked up in someone's office and talk to them about what we do and how we can help. I've done that for a long time. And actually going back to those methods of communication, looking people in the eye, the body language, all of the stuff that in lots of ways younger people are going to struggle to catch up with. Certainly my 16-year-old, she gone back into that. It was very disconnected for younger people, but actually those of us are a little bit older. To go back to that, I think there is still a pervasive sense of loneliness and a little bit of disconnection. And the more stuff we get to communicate with, the more apps, the more messaging systems, the more options, the less we seem to use them. It's about how we still create connection, even though there is all of this technological noise around us. And the way we do that is by being human with each other, by interacting sort of with each other. So, we're on Zoom now, and I think we can create a personal connection because it's you and I just chatting. And you can do that, and you can do it on web chat, and you can do it on text. You'll know if you've had a really intensive text conversation with somebody, you're really in it and you're focused on it. But a lot of our communication is very fly-by-night, it's very quick, it's very sort of arm's length, and it's not the same. So you got to work at it in that sense. But yeah, it's tricky, and that's as the world changed, and it's taking time to get to a new normal in lots of ways for a lot of people.
And I wrote down about a comparison, and what I meant by that is obviously the texting service, email, phone call, Zoom, Teams, face to face. There's like kind of 5 or 6 different variations, and for anyone listening, not against it per se, but that doesn't work, or I don't think that would work for me. I don't think personally there's not a right or wrong. I've done all forms of it in my 10 years of getting help. So, for me, each one helped at a different time. But I just wanted to put that back to, you deal with that, you deal all the different methods of communication. There's not really one better than the other. It just comes down to that individual. But I suppose it would be then highlighting that just reaching out is the key to it, no matter how you do it. There's no really comparison, and it's wrong to start comparing them.
Yeah, they're all just avenues to support at the end of the day. But everybody, I think, maybe that's a bit of a generalization. There is nothing better than being able to sit with a friend and pour your heart out and be heard and be seen and to feel supported. I think that's the kind of A game that we all aim for. That's what we want. If that's not available, then there are other options that, they might be a little bit secondary, they might be not your preferred option, but they will do the job.
And I think that's important for anyone listening. Please utilize everything. I can't stress it enough. And for quite a few conversations, I wrote down like why talking makes a difference, the positive impacts it has on it. Talking being the most important step, especially when you're starting to look after your well-being. That's the messages that by doing this that have always stuck with me and been very, very clear. And to do that now and to get to that place, the rewards and the benefits are not just Katie, the professional who's a funeral director, who's, passionate about health and well-being within the industry, but personally, that, when you can have that work-life balance. So the kind of benefits and the positivity that comes from taking care of your own well-being, kind of putting yourself first, being selfless, not selfish. That's important to say. That the benefits that someone going through that journey with yourselves, can come out the other side of it and can really help change someone's life.
It can. And I think you've also demonstrated through the work that you've done, Katie, is that this is not just about talking. Some people find talking really difficult. Some people don't want to necessarily appear in that box and share it verbally with another human being. And in some ways, we could have a whole conversation about AI and the sort of pros and cons of talking to someone that's not human, but also talking about exercise, talking about artistic and creativity, that kind of work, finding ways. We do a whole lot of work around journaling and writing things down. So there are different ways you can open that box. In some ways, if you can write about it, you can write a letter to somebody that you might have lost. Can be incredibly therapeutic. It can go in the bin, it can go in the fire, it can be buried in the garden. You don't have to show it to anybody, but actually finding somewhere to start to put those feelings. And it could be in running 10K, it could be in painting a picture or singing songs and making music, it could be in writing and journaling or gardening, or anything that actually allows you to take what's in your head and in your heart and put it somewhere that it's actually not going to destroy you.
Yeah, I think that's really key. And it comes on to my last question. I'm going to split it up. I've done this with a few people now, but I'm going to split it up into 3 different sections. For anyone listening or watching us having this conversation, any tips that, could help someone in varying areas that, professionally you could give out that can help us all just in the everyday get through the challenges that we're facing?
Yeah. Okay, so I guess a couple really, and none of this is rocket science. It never is it? It's basic common sense. The basic fundamental foundation of well-being is taking care of yourself in the same way as you take care of your mum, your kid, your dog, a friend. It is eating reasonably well. It's getting some rest and some sleep. It's getting outside and having some fresh air. It's trying to make connections with people and having downtime and rest. It's recognizing what is going on inside yourself, and when things feel a little bit off, doing something about it. Yeah, you can sit on the box for a while. Some people sit on that box for years. And that's not to say that you can't distract yourself, you can't carry on, and some people can do that very successfully. But actually, to be your best self in that sense, sometimes it can be helpful to peep in that box and see what's going on, and find something to do with it. But the basic self-care stuff, we can't function without being well enough, and that's physically well as mentally well. So that basic foundational stuff, and we find that with Brie people all the time. The first thing that goes out the window is eating. You know, people would just go like, "Oh, I can't be bothered," or "I'll just have a piece of toast," or make a ping, or I'll go to Mackey's, and this is the stuff that actually in the longer term is not going to serve you well. So care for yourself the way you would for a friend who is in your situation. That reaching out, that first, it's a hard job to recognize. You might have that sort of gut feeling. Listen to your gut. Your gut is almost never wrong in lots of ways. There's something going on that you can't quite put your finger on it, or you feel disquiet, or you feel unease. There's something that needs probably to be thought about. And whatever you do with that is entirely up to you, but thinking about it is the first stage to doing something about it. And obviously as well, while taking work seriously, and everybody throws themselves into work in this profession for sure, and the hours can be pretty unsociable, actually having some boundaries around your time. I know it's very easy for me to say because I'm not being called out at 3 a.m. And I'm not having to sit with the family till 7 or 8 p.m. or I'm not having to get up at 6 and get things done for the next funeral. But actually having, when you can, a support network at work to make sure you're not doing it all yourself. The numbers of funeral directors who are in family businesses where family members are getting on a little bit and they've been around a long time, but they are really carrying the can and doing a lot of the physical graft, as well as the running around, as well as the removals. It's a big, heavy job in that sense, and actually building in other people to help you with that is really important, and letting them as well. That's, I run a business, you are very much involved in the family business. We feel the weight of responsibility all the time, but actually you're only a player in the game. There are other players that you can have help out. Team is better than doing it all yourself.
I always put it back to I'm a big football fan, so the football analogy, the 11 players on the pitch, and that was very much a visualization thing for me going through my struggles. So putting it in your own context is key. And coming on to anyone out there that again is listening that's struggling, any advice that you could give them right now that might just click or might just give them something that could help take those first steps.
If you've been putting it off for the last 6 days, 6 weeks, or 6 months, don't put it off anymore. She says on a bank holiday weekend, send an email, pick up the phone, talk to a friend, make a note in your diary that at some point after the weekend you will find someone to talk to about what's going on for you.
I love that. And to finish off, a message. So a message to anyone listening that, let's go with a message of positivity. Let's finish it on a really high note. Like a message of, positivity that can just give us a bit of motivation, some confidence that, okay, it is difficult what we do, but we are doing it and we are looking after ourselves as best we can throughout all this.
I think it's that some days are difficult. This can be a difficult role, but it's a very purpose-driven role. People will remember what you did forever. In the most difficult time of their lives, people will remember what you did forever, and don't lose sight of that. And also don't lose sight of the fact that there is always hope. You are much more resilient than you probably give yourself credit for. And actually by accepting and asking for support, there is always hope. And yeah, look after yourselves.
I think that's great. And if anyone, wants to reach out or get in touch, if they do want to take that first step, that will be the biggest step that anyone would ever take. Where can they do that? Where can they find you guys that, provide that support?
Essentially, you can come to the SAIF website, and on the member section, you will see all the details about SAIF Support. You can give us a call. She says, trying to find the phone number very quickly, 0800 077 8578, or you can email us, help@saifsupport.co.uk. Yeah, just come chat to us. You can find us on the SAIF website. You can get in contact with us directly. any meetings, regional meetings, education days, we're usually around.
I can second that. I can second that. Catherine, thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed, chatting, and I hope anyone listening back to the conversation with myself and Catherine can take a lot away from that. And really, I think the message here is, if you are struggling, please talk to anyone that you feel comfortable with, or you can go to SAIF Support and provide you with everything you need to start you on a journey. So Catherine, thank you so much for your time today.
Very welcome. It was really, really nice to meet you, Katie, again.